I've been a fan of the Total War series since the first medieval Total War, and up until now Rome Total War and medieval Total War 2 were my favourites. I've been wanting to try the newest game, Warhammer Total War, for a long time now, but was put off by my mixed feelings towards what Rome Total War's sequel, Rome Total War 2, was like and had been received by some critics, so I decided to wait on it. In the end I waited so long that the sequel, Warhammer Total War 2, was released, and then I was faced by a dilemma of whether to get the first game or the second game, as they're both the same price, both featured undead factions, and both seemed to have pros and cons that brought the decision to almost a coin flip. The first game seemed to have more content, but the second game had more polish. In the end I compared the undead factions in both games, and decided that I liked the Tomb Kings more than I liked vampires, so I bought the second game, Warhammer Total War 2. Buying this game sure has been one of the better purchases in my life. I've been loving this game like crazy ever since I got it, and I think my fellow lovers of Necromancy, particularly those that like grand strategy, will appreciate it a lot. It's probably my favourite game in the Total War series at the moment. For those new to the Total War series, I'll briefly explain how these games work. The campaign plays like a grand strategy game where you manage cities, population, train units, etc., and move armies on a big map. Diplomacy plays a big role, and you'll be making alliances and trading with other factions in the world, and killing them of course. Conquest is the goal above all else. Aside from this grand strategy, there is also a real-time strategy aspect to the game. When a battle occurs on the campaign map, you can choose to deal with it in two ways. You can elect to resolve it automatically, which is a good option if you're feeling lazy or are such an incompetent leader that you'd actually make things worse by commanding the troops yourself. The second option is to resolve the battle yourself. You can then command the troops in real time, and here all the important aspects of battle strategy begin to matter: positioning, flanking the enemy, morale, etc. Because this is a fantasy Total War game, on top of the normal stuff you now also have spells the heroes can cast to buff and debuff, summon units, affect weather conditions, and a lot more. The game is very good in general, but here on the Chep Gonaz channel, we're here for the undead and necromancy above all else. So let's look at the undead faction in this game, the Tomb Kings. They're a race of undead with an ancient Egyptian theme to them. I love ancient Egypt and I love undead, so combining the two works really well for me. You command legions of undead in the ancient Egyptian style, complete with khopesh swords and chariots. All the standard useful units you'd expect to be there are present in undead form. Skeletal swordsmen, spearmen, archers, horsemen, horse archers, chariots, and chariot archers. There exist more elite forms of infantry too, like the Neokara warriors, which are swordsmen armed with the deadly khopesh, and the tomb guards, which are available as either swordsmen or halberdiers. The tomb guards are the most elite infantry available, and are decked out in really nice looking ancient Egyptian armour. On top of these undead troops, you can also get powerful constructs like the Ushtabi, who are animated stone statues of the Tomb King gods. They kind of remind me of the ancient Egyptian god Anubis, except instead of a living wolf's head, they have the skull of a wolf. Their statue is a lot larger of that than a human, probably about 12 feet tall or so, 4 meters tall. Another construct is the Hierotitan, which is a very large statue of a Tomb King deity of death. There's many more awesome constructs here, like the Sepulchral Stalkers, that are large, reanimated, snake-like humanoids, and the Skull Catapult for siege. You can also get beast units like scorpions, fellbats, and vultures. These are all undead versions, of course. There are many more units you can get, and a lot of what you get is faction dependent, because within the Tomb King race there are sub-factions, all with different backstory, starting location, units, and diplomatic relationships. I'm new to Warhammer and I've only had this game for about a week now, so please forgive me for any mistakes, should I make them, while briefly talking about these factions. The story goes something like this. The Tomb Kings were once a glorious civilization of humans called the Neokara. A necromancer called Nagash came along with vampire servants and destroyed the Neokara and caused their mummified dead to rise. The Neokara became the Tomb Kings, and now they seek vengeance against Nagash and his vampires. Now the sub-factions are as follows. You have Khemri, which was the greatest city in Neokara. It would seem that they're the standard Tomb King faction, and they're led by Cetra, who was the ruler of old Neokara. The court of Lybaris is led by the High Queen Khalida, who has splintered away in search of vengeance and treasure. The followers of Nagash, led by Archon the Black, are aligned with the necromancer Nagash and his vampires who destroyed old Neokara. They receive some vampire units that the other Tomb King sub-factions do not have. They're also hated by the other Tomb King factions. The last faction is the Exiles of Nayek, led by the Grand Hierophant Kartim. This is the only Tomb King faction I've played so far, and they have the highest amount of liches. For some reason they've been exiled by the other Tomb King factions and begin at odds to all of them, and they begin on the other side of the map in the Dark Elf lands. It's a fantastic starting location because you find yourself an occupier of a small patch of Dark Elf land, surrounded by multiple Dark Elf factions that absolutely hate your guts and want you gone. You're also at total odds of the beliefs of the Dark Elves. Their lands are full of corruption, and in some places up to 85%, which will do awful things to your Tomb King faction that desires to enter these lands, and it will destabilize your cities if it spreads to you. So while the Dark Elves are spreading corruption, you'll be using your Lich Lords, of which you have many, to cleanse the corruption from your lands and remove it from Dark Elven lands as well. This will cause their cities to become unruly, which is great. There's also very grumpy lizards in the south, not very far from where the Exiles of Nek begin. In my game they've been a constant thorn in my side, attacking me in the south while I'd been embattled against the Dark Elves in the north and east. You won't find any friends for a long while and will have to exist as a loner. In my playthrough I eventually met and befriended Skaven, who were fighting the Dark Elves, and we made an alliance and trade agreements. Unlike other living factions, the Tomb Kings don't depend so much on money. Recruiting troops costs nothing but time and they have no upkeep, so you're free to spend all your money on special assignments, diplomacy and buildings. Constructing military buildings allows you to train units and raises the cap for that unit. For example, if you've only got one city with an archery range, then you might have a maximum of 2 archer units available. However, if other cities have these buildings too, then you can raise that unit limit up and up. Because of this, losing units in battle isn't really a big deal as long as you've got the time to replace them. I find this quite fitting for a faction of undead. The Tomb Kings have a special resource called canoptic jars. I think these are the jars that ancient Egyptians used to store organs inside, after they'd been extracted from mummification. These accumulate by winning battles, completing quests and skilling hero units to produce them per turn. These jars can be spent on getting advanced or elite undead units, and for crafting special equipment for your heroes. There's a whole lot of things in this game I haven't covered. It's complicated, but complicated in the good way. There's lots of depth here to enjoy, and I'm really impressed with Warhammer 2 Total War. As a grand strategy game, it also fulfills all the Cheb Gonaz criteria for satisfying and fun necromancy. You get thousands of minions here. All of them are permanent until killed, and all of them are useful. All in all, it's a really great game, and I think as long as you're an appreciator of strategy and you love undead, you'll have a lot of fun with this. Another thing I'd like to mention is that I really love the sound in this game. I love how the undead talk. It kind of reminds me of the enemies in Stargate, if you ever saw that movie. And I really love the ancient Egyptian style music that plays. It's just a very well put together, high quality game. But most importantly, it's got good necromancy.